against all the evil that hell can conjure, all the wickedness that mankind can produce, we will send unto them only you. Rip and tear until it is done.
Officer down!
Are you built to endure?
To see here.
I think calling Bonelab divisive is candidate for understatement of the year. It's been a little over a month since the game came out, and there seems to be an equal amount of people who absolutely adore the game, as well as people who think
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
I land somewhere in the middle of that. And not just because I feel the need to be funny and quirky, because we all know I am so hee-hee-ha-ha quirky, but because there's so much I love about the game that goes at odds with some of the weird design choices that Stress Level Zero made in this game. First off, let's get this out of the way. Bonelab is not a true sequel to Boneworks. Even though the events take place in the Boneverse, there isn't enough content to justify this being a sequel, especially a $40 sequel at that. Don't get me wrong, I love most of the new content added and will absolutely get into that, but it's still not enough to fully justify the $40 price tag. So where exactly did Stress Level Zero, one of my absolute favorite developers, go wrong? Well, my biggest complaint would have to be the campaign. Bonelabs' campaign is severely disappointing, to say the least. I had decently high expectations due to just how much I loved the campaign on Boneworks, and while sure it had its problems, it was a great showcase of the game's physics and stood competently on its own. Each level was so open and it encouraged exploration to find secrets and weapons and other collectibles, a stark contrast from the Bonelabs campaign, which feels so much like an afterthought. It's kind of like Stress Level Zero set out to make a fully Garry's Mod-esque sandbox game, but the last minute decided they should add some semblance of a story mode, and for the most part it gets the job done, but it's such a step back from its predecessor in every way. There are 14 levels in Bonelab, which sounds amazing on paper, until you realize that one of those levels is the Bonelab itself, one is literally just you speaking to Jimmy and then it ends, and 6 of those being character unlock minigames. More on those later. So that leaves us with a grand total of 6 levels.
What the hell is this?
However, I can say that those 6 levels are actually pretty damn good. Descent, Mine Dive, Big Anomaly, and Home all stand out to me. Descent is a fantastic opening level that takes you through the abandoned back areas of Fantasyland and gives you a look into how these different games are ran and worked on inside MythOS. Mine Dive is a controversial one, but the beginning atmosphere almost feels like a horror game and I absolutely love it. The minecart ride that follows is a complete change in tone and goes on for way too long, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a dumbass smile across my face the whole time while first playing it. Big Anomaly is easily my favorite though. You arrive in this abandoned Monogon office that feels like it was straight out of a liminal space picture. Every time I play it, I feel genuinely creeped out. However, you aren't alone, and there are Omni projectors all over the place that you'll have to deal with. There are some corridors where these things just keep flooding in no matter how many you kill, and it constantly keeps you focused because you never know what'll be around the next corner. It also helps this level gives you the shotgun for the first time, which is so satisfying to use in these fights. Home is the last mission of the game, and it's a rather somber one. You return to Fantasyland to essentially wipe everyone out. The music adds to this feeling, and it's overall another very interesting change in tone. That'll teach him for interrupting my Shadow Demon communion. That is until the end where you ride the Big Hammed. Going back to the character unlock missions, they feel so out of place and should have happened much earlier in the campaign. By the time you get all the avatars, there's like 2 missions left, and only one of them utilizes the avatars in a meaningful way. The unlock missions themselves aren't great either. The only 3 really worth mentioning are Pillar Climb, Street Puncher, and Monogon Motorway. Pillar Climb sucks absolute balls, and I will not elaborate any further. Just trust me. Street Puncher is a level that actually feels like it should be in the campaign. The environments are highly polished, the layout is great, and it lends itself to some really fun moments. And the music fits it perfectly. Seriously, this level feels like it came straight out of Hotline Miami, and I love it so fucking much. Finally, we have Monogon Motorway. The only reason I felt the need to mention it is that while it still should not have been a campaign level at all, since it's just a go-kart time trial, I still enjoy it for that fact, and the music makes me want to snort a line of G Fuel and drive well above the speed limit.
But if you were
On the topic of music, since I'm not sure where else I get a chance to talk about it, this is also kind of a mixed bag for me. Boneworks has one of my absolute favorite soundtracks of all time, and it perfectly encapsulates the feeling of infiltrating this virtual world and being basically all alone. So many tracks create this almost sense of wonder, and it fits the game perfectly. In terms of music, the Bonelab soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. It's not an issue of quality here, it's the fact that it hardly really fits with the game. None of the music ever really matches what is happening besides the times I've mentioned before, like Monogon Motorway or Street Punch. It felt kind of all over the place with no real direction in mind. I mean, you can make the argument then that it does fit with the campaign, since that also feels like it had no real direction. But I still absolutely love Riot's work, and the soundtrack itself is phenomenal when listened to outside of the game. In fact, there's even still some callbacks to Boneworks. Okay, so the campaign itself is a pretty big letdown. But how's the story? Did they improve the almost non-existent storytelling at all from Boneworks? As I had mentioned before, the storytelling in Boneworks was genuinely almost non-existent, and that was kind of one of the biggest complaints people had about the game. Bonelab does absolutely nothing to improve on that. It makes all the same mistakes as before. While yes, I am absolutely aware that these games have genuinely fantastic stories, but unless you're like me and you spend way too much time digging into the lore along with every piece of information you can find about Stress Level Zero's games, none of it will make sense at all. However, I've got you covered. Here's all you need to know. Bonelab is a game where you play as who is rescued from the least hostile Yorkshire residents by our man Jimmy, who seeks to recruit you into an organization called Lava Gang. Apparently the other villagers found you performing some ritual to commune with the void, which led to your execution. Do not commune with the void in Yorkshire. Worst mistake of my life. You eventually ascend through the void and meet Jimmy in person? Void person? Yeah? Throughout the game, he talks about something evil being out in the void, but we never quite learn what that is. My theory is that he's referring to the cat cryptid that was shown entering a door marked Dead FM in Duck Season. Yes, there are a whole list of fucking cryptids in this storyline that they just don't tell you about unless you play a game that is seemingly unrelated. As you now know though, Dead FM is Jimmy's radio station, and it's apparently one of the earliest ideas Stress Level Zero had for a VR title. Told you. I dig deep on these things. The idea is that Jimmy wants us to create mods and build upon the game to help fight these cryptids, as evidented by the fact that he constantly mentions that he doesn't want an army, he wants builders, which I don't know about you, but if I was that cat demon and I saw half the shit people are making on mod.io, I'd be fucking horrified. It's frustrating though that these things aren't better explained in the game. Like, if you go digging around in the first level of Bonelab, you learn that the Fantasyland devs gave the NPCs sentience to learn how they'd act. However, they were so stupid and couldn't survive in such a, easily survivable environment that the devs decided fuck it and just started sending up weapons to teach them violence, just to see what would happen. There's so many pieces of lore like this that are just buried away, and you've really got to search to find them. I recommend watching these videos from Virtual Panda to get a better idea of what's happening. He covers both Bonelab and Boneworks, so give it a watch. So the campaign is short and the story is barely coherent. So where's the bulk of the content in Bonelab? That lies in the sandbox and modding. The overall sandbox and modding experience is where Bonelab goes from an alright game to a fucking amazing game. The main lab consists of 5 major game types with multiple maps in each, along with room to be expanded upon. The Sandbox has also received so many new additions ranging from weapons to gadgets to NPCs, and my favorite, the go-kart. I've spent so many hours in this game messing around with this thing, and that will not stop anytime soon. I've learned my favorite thing to do is to weld things onto it and make a whole ass death cart. Like adding these 2 modded miniguns to the side. I mean, fucking look at this thing. Oh, and how can I forget the main selling feature of Bonelab? The custom avatars. On my first playthrough, I initially thought these were kind of useless, but my opinion has changed greatly. I mean, seriously, with some of the possibilities of these, I don't know how I thought these were useless in the first place. Like, being able to adapt on the fly to any situation is so nice. I think the only real main issue is that the main avatars are just kind of boring. Like, why is there Space Bingus? I love Bingus, but why is there Space Bingus? But that can be helped by the other main selling point. Mods. Boneworks already had mods, so this isn't new to a lot of people, including myself. But if you've ever modded Boneworks, you know that unless you use a mod manager, it is a complete pain in the ass, and sometimes not even worth the effort. But Bonelab actually comes with an SDK and built-in mods, so it's so much better. So much better. So now you can turn these base characters into almost anything. Like, one of my favorites has to be this Atom Smasher mod. It's just perfect, and you'll probably see it a lot in the gameplay. However, I'm not really the happiest with mod features being a selling point over a campaign. I mean, especially because the mod features kind of came half-baked. It only currently officially supports custom avatars and levels, which isn't stopping people, but that should have came at launch, especially for the fact that it doesn't even have an in-game mod downloader or manager. Like, games like Contractors that also use mod.io have an actual in-game mod downloader that automatically updates the mods. This should have been at launch. This is a necessity, and if Stress Level 0 is working on anything, this absolutely needs to be one of them. Really, the only other complaint I have about the Sandbox is the fact that while we have new NPCs, they aren't really changed. Like, all the AI basically uses the exact same null body and forward AI that we've seen throughout the entirety of Boneworks, and even some, like, very basic turret AI. It's nothing crazy, but I guess at least it's something kind of new. I just would have loved to see a lot more variety to the NPC sandbox, you know, more enemies that use like maybe melee weapons or ranged weapons. Fighting the Omni projectors has always been one of my absolute favorite things in the game, so maybe even some new forms of them, like a long range one or a shotgun one, just something to spice it up, because there's nothing new in terms of enemies. I mean, it's not like they're not fun to fight, but there needs to be a little more than just new models. With all that being said, it probably seems like I'm not the biggest fan of the game, but that just simply isn't true. I still absolutely love the game because at its core, it's more Boneworks gameplay. Sure, it lacks the campaign, but the Sandbox is just so much better in every way that it's honestly not even a competition in my opinion. Bonelab to me just feels like it might have been part of a bigger game at some point. It was potentially split into 2 different games. I do remember the devs saying something like that, but I don't know if I remember exactly where they said it. I mean, from early concept art, we can see that the game was wildly different. I don't know what's going on here, but I want it. I want to know what this is. I think what happened was that hype just got way too out of hand for this game. I mean, it makes sense, it's Stress Level 0's new game, but I think if they would have more marketed it as a modding platform instead of like this full-blown huge sequel, I don't think hype would have been as crazy. Also, the YouTubers constantly talking about how it's going to change VR forever did not help in any way. Overall, did Bonelab change VR forever?
No.
Is it pretty disappointing?
Yeah.
But do I love it despite all its shortcomings? And do I think that in the future it has the potential to easily surpass Boneworks? Yes. Absolutely. This is one that you might want to wait for, but if you buy it now, I don't think you'll be disappointed by the overall Sandbox experience. I mean, I'm still going in and messing around with all this random stuff, and I'm going to continue to. It's still a very, very fun game. But hey, that's just the ramblings from my dumbass brain. How do you feel about Bonelab? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, Jimmy, send us off.
Oh, give me land, lots of land, under starry skies.